Good evening, and welcome to the first in our series of Wildfire Preparedness Workshops. My name is Rich Shortall, Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. These workshops are meant to help you build the knowledge, skills, and ability, and give you some confidence to make the kind of improvements that you need to do to make your family and your home safe from wildfire. The workshops are also an opportunity for you to ask questions of your local fire agency representatives and get important updates on the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority funded wildfire prevention projects in your area. These workshops, in fact, are funded by the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Before we start the program, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Supervisor Dennis Rodoni, who is also a member of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Board of Directors. Supervisor.
Thank you, Rich. Really an honor to be here tonight. As you mentioned, I'm District 4 Supervisor, Director of Emergency Services at the County of Marin, and I also serve on the MWPA Governing Board. Special thank you to Fire Safe Marin and your staff for putting on this workshop and recognizing the Marin Wildfire Fire Prevention Authority for its leadership in allowing these programs to be brought to our communities. I think I also like to recognize our partners in West Marin on the Marin Wildfire Protection Authority, the Inverness Public Utility District, Bolinas Fire District, Stinson Beach Fire District, Muir Beach Community Service District, and certainly our Marin County Fire Department. We've learned a lot since 2017 with the North Bay fires, and we worked quickly to address those wildfire preparedness issues with Measure C in March 2020, and now the creation of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. It was a great undertaking and a wonderful thing to do, and we're really glad that we have it up and running. Just this last week, the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution recognizing Wildfire Awareness Week as May 1st through 7th. The opening whereas stated, California has experienced a prolonged and severe drought. The current water year is one of the driest in 125 years of record, and with the April 19th start date for staffing the wildfire engines throughout California, it is critically important that residents join their fire agencies in preparing for the 2021 fire season. The concluding whereas said, fire departments throughout Marin take every precaution to help protect you and your property from wildfire. In the event of a major wildfire, firefighting resources will be stretched. Please prepare now to protect yourself, your family, and your property from a devastating wildfire. Take time to learn more about how you can prepare and visit firesafemarin.org. You've begun that process tonight by attending this workshop, and I really want to thank you all for attending. And again, thanks Fire Safe Marin for putting this on. Thank you, Rich.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Rodoni. I really appreciate that. And I do want to thank you very much for all of the hard work you've done to help keep Marin better prepared to prevent ourselves from wildfire danger. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will point out that, again, this is very focused on West Marin tonight. And that's why our first guest here is Marin County Fire Captain Jordan Reeser. Jordan, you want to join us and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, here I am. You got me, Rich. Thanks for having me. Yes, hello, Jordan Reeser with the Marin County Fire Department. I'm really happy to be here and participate in this, and I will be participating and this is the inaugural one, the first one, but in others as Marin County has responsibilities throughout the county. So we're looking forward to engaging with the community here. I am a Marinite, born and raised in West Marin, and I have quite a bit of a diverse background in fire management, fire suppression, typical fire operation stuff, as well as some different things that maybe the fire departments here don't normally have in their repertoires or in their experience. I worked for the federal government for close to 25 years throughout the country, involved in wildfire suppression, wildfire and prescribed fire implementation throughout the West, the Intermountain region, the Southeast, and numerous places. So I bring a pretty wide breadth of experience and knowledge and experience in fire behavior and impacts to communities and people from all of those different areas. And they all are the same in a lot of ways. They might be different fuels that are burning in different vegetation types, but the impact to the communities are similar, and there is a lot of nexus between that also. I think I can bring a little bit of interesting perspective. Being a local guy who was born and raised here, I'm very familiar with the local terrain, topography, and vegetation, and then also kind of that little more worldly view of the fire operations and potential impacts that are out there.
Great. Well, thanks, Jordan. It's great to have you here. Just for the audience, a little preview of what's coming tonight. So the workshop's divided into several segments, and each one begins with a short 10 to 12 minute video. And after the videos, we'll bring Captain Reeser back on, and we'll take some questions from the audience, and we'll just cover the topics that you saw during that video. We really do encourage all of you to participate by providing your questions in writing. There's that little Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Just type your question in there. We'll get to it. Anything that we can't address tonight, we will respond in writing. You'll be able to find it on our website, the response to it there. We do ask, though, that you keep your questions related to the topic of the evening. Tonight's presentation will be recorded. You can view it in the future. You'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel. Our first video tonight features Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Executive Officer Mark Brown's description of the events that took place at the recent glass fire in Sonoma. This was just last year. Mark's home happens to be in the area, and he was on scene during the fire. There's really a lot that we can learn from his analysis of what happened at that fire, why some homes burned, and why some didn't. So, Jen, if we could start that video.
Being a resident of the Skyhawk subdivision and being recently retired from the Marin County Fire Department and the new executive officer for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, I thought this was just too good of an example for us to miss. September 27th, that's the right date, right? The glass fire started in the early morning, 3:30, 4 a.m., something like that. And I'm looking at where it is on the map. I'm going, all right, shouldn't have a tremendous impact for me. Should run in, if it crosses the valley, it should run into the Nuns Fire and some of the other fires for 2017. But I think it's far enough south, it's not going to impact me. So if you saw in a presentation, you might have thought, well, that was a funny first picture you put in there, where kind of a dark picture with a little lantern. That's a timestamp. And to give some context to how fast these situations can come about. That's about when I'm hearing sirens. Pull out my phone and I look at the location and I'm like going, that's the absolute worst spot for this subdivision for a fire to start. When I first pull it to incident command post, it's 9:15. Finally get situated where I can stand side by side with the incident commander. And as I'm standing next to him, he goes, all right, you're at about 300 to 500 acres. And it's going to be in Santa Rosa in 2 hours. The fire was actually progressing down that slope slowly, and I was actually really happy with the way it was progressing. You go to the next slide, which is the timestamp of 0048. You'll see trees flapping in the wind. It's those trees right there that are flapping in the wind. And again, listen to the wind and look at the change of wind direction. And that's the fire becoming well established in this drainage and making a hard run down this drainage. And this is a high school friend of mine's house. And that's why we have permission to go onto his property. Every time I walk by his house, I'm going, well, Sean, you got privacy, but I'm not sure that's the best thing for you. So when I got down here, the bottom of this brambly rose bush had just gotten going. I squirted it for a little while, got it out, and then you can see not just that corner, but the upper corner of that bush started burning. You see this carcass of a rose bush. You look at the trees, to Todd's point, right, Todd? The trees were damaged by everything else that was burning. The trees really didn't transmit the fire. It was the ember cast that was, in my opinion, coming off of this, getting blown against. And you see that there used to be a gazebo, and then what is Chris? There were some type of vines on the gazebo.
Looks like it could be dry and not a lot of leaves. I'm not sure what it is.
I can't remember for sure, but one thing that bothers me, and it could be after the fact, but the lowest burn is over here.
Propane. Probably fueled by the vines that came into the apple tree.
and eventually got the propane tank going, but the propane was probably blowtorch in this way.
And it may or may not have been after the house got well involved. But it was, to me, whether it was that piece there, and you see the little architectural feature that creates a chimney type effect, but it was the flammable material that was up against the home, and then the wind pushing the embers from this up against the house and then forcing it up into the attic vents. And so the whole idea of blocked eaves, Vulcan vents, no blocked eaves, no Vulcan vents on this home. And it burned from the attic down, I guarantee you. I watched it. You know, for many of the homes that were destroyed, I really believe that if people had done their home hardening and zone 0 defensible space work, those homes would have survived. If they didn't have flammable material within the 3 to 5 feet of space of their home, if they would have blocked their eaves or they had improved vents so that the fire could not get in their attic, I firmly believe they would have survived this fire. So the newer homes were built to 7A standards. And yes, there was suppression action taken on that deck fire up there. But look at the beating that the side of that house took, and it didn't get into the attic. I have to think that there was building code 7A standards helped save that home besides suppression action. But virtually, from what I see, every one of them burned from the attic down. And then, Paul, if you want to talk about what you and I were talking about, please.
Different wood chips really reacted much different than we would have expected. There's a wood chip that has a red dye. That wood chip is what you find at that house that's got the heavy damage to it. It literally consumed every single wood chip between fence line to fence line to fence line. And then immediately next to it, taking the heat that it did, we had that cedar chip, and it didn't do anything. We had multiple yards where the cedar did fantastic. And then just downhill from the red dye chip was the gorilla hair, and we talked to some of those crews, and it took them hours to try and pull apart, you know, six inches to a foot of mulch to fully extinguish it.
This is where I have one of the first pictures from May of 2019, that when I was on one of my walks, and so that first picture is of these two houses, right? Not too much has changed since that picture, minus the fire. And what looked like was the primary carrier fire up that slope?
The fence.
The fence. The fence, right? And it's somewhat hard to tell exactly what caused the fence to get going. It looks to me that the gorilla hair allowed the fence to get going. If there had been nothing flammable up against that fence, it's unlikely the embers hitting that fence would have got the fence going. It needed something to maintain the heat underneath the fence, and then once the fence got going, it maintained its own combustion and walked up the hillside, and looks like someone went in and kicked a few panels out. It's looking this way. You can see the handrails of a walking path. So you have that beige house, there's a gap in homes that's purposeful, it's an open space, walking path that comes down, and then the remnants of a house is just on the other side of the gap. So if you look at those pictures, you'll see the second house had remarkable defensible space work in their property and in the area of the easement below them. And then when you look at the fourth house what do you notice in that picture? The house with the remnants of trees below it.
Continuous canopy.
A continuous canopy, and when we get up top and look at it from up there, you'll be shocked how close some of those trees were to the house. It created two different types of ladders as well. Not a ladder up the slope, but also a ladder from the ground into the trees. I think the house with the trees was probably the first house that started.
When were your pictures taken?
What was likely underneath those trees that singed those trees and allowed the fire to slowly creep up that property?
I think mulch, I think a great example is the second tree up, like the deciduous tree up there. It has that nice little ring around it. At least looks like it from here.
Put some mulch around there to help with the erosion, help hold water, so that the trees could have moisture to grow. You'll see the batch of several homes that were destroyed. And then these two homes that weren't destroyed. And then we have a home, where you see this, the roof timber still sticking up, and then a home completely on the ground. And it struck me, why is there that gap? And I think when we get up to, you might be able to see why that gap, or why did the new home get involved up there instead of house to house against the wind? What's that, Chris?
That one was surrounded by Italian cypress.
Wait till you see it up top. Of the skeletons of Italian cypress immediately upwind from the structure. And like I will bet a paycheck that that's what burned that house down. The before picture, blackberry and bramble that was virtually impenetrable. And then let's look at this house. I mean, as D-space evaluators and you're looking at this house, what are you saying to yourself?
I would say that those are deciduous trees that didn't ever get involved in the fire, and they browned out because of what was on the ground underneath them. Yeah. So clearance shouldn't mean removing those trees. They probably provided some protection to the house. Limbing them up and cutting this grass that was underneath them right here is what would have made a difference.
I think you're right. Yeah. But trees not being the total enemy is an important message. When we go to this last house up here, you'll see that the trees were damaged because the house burned down. It wasn't the trees that burned down the house. That house we've talked about, the other way around. But the vast majority of the trees, it wasn't the trees were damaged because of the house. If we just do a good job of having separation and not creating that ladder fuel, then we'll be successful. And you see that house right there, that deck caught on fire. And it's probably because the bramble that was in here, that bramble that was holding fire, finally started to carry up the slope. They probably had some stuff that allowed that deck to get going underneath. It took some significant suppression actions to save that home, and they were just lucky that there were fire engines already in this area. Take a look at the fence in between. So whether it was the deck that got the fence going and the fence walked this way, probably what happened, right? But it could have easily been the deck that got the fence gets going over here and then gets into the eaves in another spot. I think that's one of the most important messages we have to drive home. How we're going to keep our communities safer is if we focus from the house and work out from there. And if we make our home in such a way that embers can land on or around the home and our home does not become ignited, then not only is your home saved, but homes downwind from your home are saved.
All right, we're back in here. Jordan's going to join me in a second. Mark Brown did just a really great job with that. That's a very edited version of almost 3 hours that he spent out there working with those the home evaluators, and there was so much to be learned from that. And I think what really is a take home for all of us, usually we see pictures of things like Paradise where everything is just burned down to the ground. You go, wow, it's like hopeless, right? But here was an example where a lot of homes survive for all the reasons that you described, whether the proper mulching was used, whether the vents were screened, the surrounding vegetation, et cetera, et cetera. So Jordan, you have some thoughts on that?
Mark obviously did a really great job, and that was his neighborhood. And I remember he was texting us kind of as the situation was developing up there, as we were sending resources up there. And I think it's also just on that fire in particular, as others that were happening around the state. That is one neighborhood. I think the glass fire, 1,600 homes burned down in that fire. So that's one neighborhood, one piece. It was 70,000 acres, that had some significant destructive force behind it, and a lot of homes were lost. So this is one neighborhood, and part you could see a lot of those were newer construction homes, right? And Santa Rosa and a lot of the communities are very similar to ours. There are some, older buildings and older construction that exists throughout the communities in the downtowns and in the urban interface. So, I think it goes to show though that the little things can make a difference, right? And that'll be the theme, I think, today. Tonight is embers, particularly the impacts of embers, and the really our new paradigm shift, which we've always known as firefighters, is really focusing on the structure itself and the vegetation and the arrangement of things around your home within that 0 to 5 feet, and those are things that most of us can do, right? And we can do them with our backs and with our bodies, and also with a little bit of funds at time. They're not, the larger home hardening picture can be a little overwhelming and daunting, but there's a lot of little things that we can do that can make a difference. So I think that's the key takeaway for me, participating in this, talking to Mark about it, knowing firefighters and us who are up there in other places, and we see it time and time again, that these standards and these new standards that are getting in place, the 7A that he was mentioning, that's just a new building code standard in the state. It's basically a materials and construction standard that needs to be applied in the WUI 2 new construction or permitted construction. So that's what he was referencing there.
So thanks, Jordan. And by the way, about the same time that fire was happening, we had our own large fire in Marin County out there in West Marin. I think you were involved in that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We did. We had the Woodward fire, and it was a fairly unique event, just in a time perspective, that we don't get a lot of lightning fires in Marin. It was a lightning caused fire out towards Limitor Beach. And it started at the same time. There were numerous fires that started throughout the state as a lightning event moved through the area. A lightning doesn't occur here often, but it does occur, and it can start fires. It just depends on the time of the year and the receptivity of the fuels, et cetera. So we won't go too much into the Woodward, but we did have a fire, and I can't remember the total acreage at the end. There was some moments where it definitely had some potential to threaten some of our communities in Inverness and Bolinas and Alima, and obviously was pretty significant smoke impact to much of Marin, and it lasted for quite some time. And primarily the reason it did last so long, and it was kind of so impactful, was that it was really rooted in the Point Reyes wilderness, right? In a fire adaptive ecosystem with plants and vegetation that is relying upon fire and hadn't burned for quite some time. Much of the fire originally was actually in the Vision fire footprint. So it had a unique fuel loading there because there's been some post-fire mortality of regeneration of trees and stuff. So the fuel loading is pretty significant. So we had a pretty unique scenario, but in the end, I like to say it was a good fire, because we had a couple minor injuries to some firefighters, unfortunately, but we didn't lose any homes. And it was a naturally ignited fire that the land itself is accustomed to and needs for its overall health and regeneration and rejuvenation. And I think that's an important piece, that the living with fire conversations that come up, fire adapted communities and ecosystems. Fire is part of our landscape in California. Whether or not we want to adopt that personally, it is up to us, but it has burned and will continue to burn across our landscape. So the fire it burned through most of the summer, and actually I was back out at the beach, went out to the beach late November-ish, mid-November, and there was still active fire interior of the fire, still burning, well after rains, and there's so much large fuel out there. A side note, Rich, I did see a note today, or a story today, that they actually found fire still burning in the Sequoia National Forest that was started last summer about the same time. It's actually in the national park there. So the fire held over through the course of the winter in some large diameter logs because of the drought. And then actually they were out on the fire looking, doing fire effects and assessing kind of damage and regeneration. And they actually found active fire that had held over throughout the winter. So we learned a lot from the Woodward fire, and a lot of it was we learned, and it was a good reminder that we do have fire in this county. We have the potential for large fires in our timber communities, in our brush communities, and not just in the grass along the freeways.
Right. Well, that's kind of a good segue to go into our next segment, which is basically what we call wildfire science. There are a lot of misunderstandings about how wildfire destroys homes. So let's take off and we'll take a look at that. Jen, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Brown. As Rich mentioned, I have the honor to serve as the Deputy Fire Chief for the Marin County Fire Department. And as I was thinking about how to best describe to everybody what or how we got to today's fire environment, it dawned on me that we really have three failures that are disguised as successes. The first one is our total fire suppression policies that we adopted way back in 1910. And California ecology needs fire to be healthy, and we've interrupted that cycle. And so we've created unhealthy forests. We've tried to let those fires burn at times if they were lightning-caused fires and they were in a location where it was safe for them to burn. But if there's a structure threat or a life threat, then we have to go and suppress that fire, which furthers the problem. The next success that is really a failure is the success of pushing people further and further into the wildland, living in the wildland urban interface. And quite honestly, where there are people, there are ignitions. When there's ignitions, we're going to have fire. And where there are people, we have to suppress that fire. So therefore, we're continuing the damage to our forests. And then we get to the most important failure, or a series of some successes, and that is creating our industry, creating our transportation, and our power generation. All of these successes of humankind have they've been a failure to the environment, and through the increase of carbon emissions and what they have done to add to our climate change. And just to give it really succinctly, in California, our fire season has increased by about 75 days a year. So that's more than 2 months a year that we have increased fire season. And therefore, we obviously have more opportunity for fire, but almost as important as that is that the fuels, the vegetation out there just doesn't have the time to recover, doesn't have time to bring in that moisture, and it doesn't have that time to be healthy. So we've created this really vicious cycle. And, as a fire service, we were almost staying ahead of the explosive nature of this new fire environment. Starting in 2013 and a few fires before that, we started to really tip that scale over to where we're not keeping up anymore.
Wildfires are a natural event. A long time ago in California, wildfires were often started by lightning, igniting dry leaves and underbrush in the forests. There were lots of wildfires, but they weren't very destructive because there wasn't as much fuel to burn on the forest floor. Regular fires do the hard cleanup work for us. Native Americans understood that forests were healthier if they experienced lots of small fires, which burned dead wood and debris on the forest floor. They would even set fires to encourage this healthy cycle. This helped large trees stay healthy, made it easier for the native people to hunt and grow food. For the last 100 years or so, we've been putting out wildfires because we were worried that fires were dangerous to people. At first, fighting fires was easy because the forests were clean from years of natural fires. But over time, our forests have suffered. When small fires are not allowed to burn, dead wood and other flammable debris builds up. Now when fires start, they become much bigger and spread fast because the fire has a lot of dry material to burn. Here are two diagrams to describe fires. The first is called the fire triangle. It shows that we need heat, fuel, and oxygen for any fire to burn. The second is called the wildfire triangle. A wildfire needs three special things: fuel that can burn, weather, which is dry and windy, and topography. Topography means the shape of the land. Remember that heat rises, so fires usually go uphill much faster than they go downhill. When it's windy, the wind is stronger at the top of mountains and in the valleys between mountains. So the wind often spreads fires up hills and through valleys. The wind not only forces heat and flames in front of it, but it also sends embers long distances. Embers are small burning materials like leaves and small pieces of wood that can be blown in the wind and smoke. When these embers fall back to the ground, they can start many small fires, called spot fires. When an ember lands near your home, it can start a fire in grass that hasn't been cut, in bushes that have lots of dry, dead leaves and twigs, or on wooden furniture and cushions that have been left outside, or in leaves that are on your roof, in your rain gutters, or on the ground around your house. The embers can also enter homes through open doors and windows, or through the vents that are needed around your home for foundations and attics. Embers are the main causes of houses burning during a wildfire. As climate change warms our planet, wildfire conditions are getting worse. Over time, the average yearly temperature is higher and climbing. Changing climate also affects weather patterns. We're experiencing longer periods without rain, and many trees are dying due to drought. Our fire season is now 2 months longer than when your parents were kids. Many parts of our landscaping are drying out, and this makes the trees and bushes more likely to burn. When we have more strong wind days, all we need is a spark and a wildfire can start, which is hard to put out. Understanding wildfires helps us to live with a natural part of our ecology. We need them to keep our forests in balance, but we also need to understand fire's behavior to know how to protect ourselves and our homes.
The title of this presentation is Community Fire Destruction During Extreme Wildfires, a Home Ignition Problem. Well, so perhaps you say a home ignition problem? Well, duh, we wouldn't be having this if homes didn't ignite. But what if we could prevent homes from igniting and our communities from burning to destruction? So for right now, with our mind's eye, let's visualize our perception of how extreme wildfires ignite homes in communities. So wildfires are inevitable, and thus extreme wildfires are inevitable. And so does this mean that wildland urban fire disasters are inevitable? And my answer to that is no. But you might be surprised based on your perception of how homes ignite during extreme wildfires. So what is the general perception of how homes ignite? Well, here are 3 interview perceptions of home destruction during wildfires. The firestorm descended like a dragon from hell on the foothill neighborhoods and laid them to waste. The wildfire swept through the community with a tsunami of flame. The wildfire literally exploded houses in flames, leaving in its path. It was like a war zone. But when we look at the evidence of the disasters, when we go and examine the evidence of the disasters, the typical pattern of destruction is total home destruction with unconsumed vegetation. So what this scene indicates is that no walls of flame sweeping through communities occur, and wildfires don't literally or figuratively explode houses in flames. So wildfire spreads as a sequence of ignitions, not as a sweeping mass of flame, even in this kind of behavior that we call crown fires in shrubs and trees. So when we see a scene like this, the high-intensity crown fire burning from right to left stops at the first residential street of this neighborhood, just from 40 feet of gap between the canopies at this street. So even without the crown fire, total home destruction occurs on the left side, initiated by burning embers from that extreme fire behavior. So what do unconsumed vegetation in homes adjacent to total destruction indicate? Wildfire not spread through the community like a lava flow, flash flood, or tsunami that explodes houses in flame, leaving total destruction in its wake. And very importantly, this kind of total destruction surrounded by green does not indicate high intensity wildfire exposure. So where we have a choice, if we define wildland urban fire as a home ignition problem, we can focus on making our homes ignition resistant during extreme wildfires and prevent ignitions. So preventing ignition and burning within this 5-foot zone next to building materials is a very critical element. But note in this photo, in this scene, that it was the pine needles that burned, not the shrubbery that was over the pine needles, because it's there unconsumed, scorched but unconsumed. And we see a similar scene of where this house ignited and was successfully protected with the same kind of non-combusted, non-consumed shrubs with the pine needles carrying the fire and igniting from lofted burning embers. So we need to create a non-ignition zone within 5 feet of a home and its flammable attachments to prevent this kind of damage and potential total destruction.
It's important to understand that in fire adaptive communities, the public understands certain components. They understand that there's a role that fire will play on the surrounding landscape. They understand that fire authorities cannot save all homes. They may not be able to. And lastly, that the community mitigation actions will reduce the unwanted impacts of wildfire. In a fire adaptive community, the public also is going to take action. They're going to support and enhance local fire protection capacity, what the firefighters can do, and then what they can do through Ready, Set, Go. They can prepare structures for wildfire via either being firewise or living with fire or similar principles. They need to take action to build fire-resistant materials and use low-risk landscapes. They also need to increase and maintain risk reduction efforts over time. This is the holistic approach that the community needs to take under a fire adaptive community model. The community takes a variety of integrative actions specific to their community. So as you can see, there are many different steps that a community can take, and not every community is going to take the same step.
All right, we're back again. So quite a lot of information in there. Jordan, what do you think about Jack Cohen's statement that what we really have is a home ignition problem rather than a wildfire problem?
Well, I would agree on premise with the statement for sure. Obviously, fires that are burning in a landscape without homes and no threat to humans wouldn't be considered destructive or catastrophic, right? It's the human piece and the life property that really kind of triggers that in our response, our historic response to fire. And I think a key component too, as we look at, what he's really getting at is in my opinion, is that ember source, the ignition source around homes. And in California in particular, I think we have, because of the theater of fire, which it becomes when the media gets involved, is we really get the information we get is on these really large fires. But there's the potential for someone to lose their home on a small fire. When I would call it, it could be a small 2-acre fire or 4-acre fire. It doesn't have to be a catastrophic fire. And if their home is against some open space or against a neighbor's home, and there's embers landing on there, if they're not prepared for the large fire, they need to be prepared for the small ones too, because I think, talking to someone who loses their home during a 10-acre fire is the impact is just the same for someone who loses their home during a 70,000-acre fire. So I think recognizing the importance of where we build homes and how we build homes, that's a larger political issue that he, you know, as we expand out and need more space. But how we take care of our existing homes, and I think there's a video later that talks a little bit about kind of the current state of affairs a little bit, but it really is, you know, about thinking about small events as well that can impact us significantly. And Marin is set up for small events because we do have a very robust fire suppression response, but we have really challenging roads and infrastructure that for fire equipment to get to a newly started fire. So there's a high probability that a fire that starts on a fairly high or moderate fire day, where there's a fire threat day, fire danger day, that, you know, a small fire could transition into, you know, a medium size. And I don't want to get caught up in sizes, but, you know, smaller fires have significant impacts to burn homes down, as well as single trees torch, as bushes torch, as people's gutters weren't clean because, you know, there wasn't kind of this imminent threat of this large fire coming. And I think lastly, Rich, thinking about what he was saying about, you know, we need to be very careful too, where we try to categorize fire and to compartmentalize it, right? There are situations in this country and in the state where there are walls of fire moving into communities, especially some of the Southern California chaparral communities and whatnot. So it's not trying to take away from the reality that there are very large, fast moving fires that can be very destructive, but a majority recently of these kind of urban fires that we've seen loss of life in homes have mostly been due to kind of what he was speaking of. So it doesn't remove that historic vision of some people have of this very large, fast moving wall of flame, because that does occur and will continue to occur. And it's actually a critical way, you know, that fire intensity is how much of California chaparral and other species are reliant on fire of that intensity to help with their regeneration. So we don't want to discount or brush away the historic kind of vision of the threat from fire, because that still exists, definitely still exists.
Well, I think from the perspective of Fire Safe Marin too, I really appreciate Chief Tyler's emphasis on fire adapted communities. We used to call it living with fire, but it has been said, and we all know, we live in California. There are going to continue to be wildfires. You just can't make them all go away. So we need to adapt to that. And sometimes people give up. They throw up their hands and go, my gosh, look what happened in Paradise. It comes, it just wipes everything out. It's hopeless, I give up. But I think we're trying to make the point, particularly since what we're likely to experience in Marin County is the ember-driven fire on the large wind-driven event day. There are a lot of actions that you can take to protect your home and make your home able to survive that kind of a wildfire. So you're going to hear a lot more about it as we go on defensible space, home hardening, all the rest of it. But these are things that you can do. They're practical, and these steps work. We do have a question or two here. Let me take a quick look. I'm going to say this. So I'm going to save this one for a minute because this is sort of a defensible space question, but it has to do with the neighbor not taking care of a problem. So we'll get to that. Let's take this opportunity and go on to the next video. It is on defensible space, and then we can come back to that question. So Jen, you want to pull that one up, please?
I want to illustrate it and bring it to the practical level for homeowners, give you some tips, some ideas of what you can look for and how you can make changes around your home. The first 5 feet is really illustrated right here. We're talking about the surface, the ground, the area right around the outside walls of your house. And we've got a lot of information on home hardening. We've got information on defensible space, landscaping, plant selection, all of these things tie together. They're all important. None of them stand alone. But I really think that we've learned that this zone 0, this first 5 feet, is the most critical place for you to pay attention to. And what I like is that it's also the easiest place for homeowners to take action. So recap here. Most homes are going to ignite from embers. I'm going to show you a couple images that will help you understand what we're talking about when we refer to embers. This is video from a police officer's dashboard cam during the campfire in 2018. You can see the intensity, the number of embers. These are embers blowing across a road. Presumably there are homes in that vicinity.
This is a fantastic illustration of what those embers can do, in this case, in the forest or grasslands around a community. Again, this is the campfire. These are embers falling from the sky. And look back down when he swings the camera back down. Look what's happened in the few seconds since they turned the camera to the sky. These are spot fires that have ignited in fine grasses, fine vegetation fuels. And frankly, the same thing was happening in the front yards and around the surfaces around homes in that same vicinity. Here's another image, those embers, when they land on surfaces around a home, when they land on the combustible materials around the outside of the home, and your bark mulch, for example, those materials will ignite, leaving green trees in the vicinity of this home. This is research that I think Steve was intimately involved in, but it's one of the best illustrations. This is a home that IBHS built in a laboratory setting. The right-hand side of the home is built with ignition-resistant materials. The left-hand side, not so much. The left-hand side used a bark mulch within 5 feet of the structure. The right-hand side used a decorative gravel mulch, and you can see the dramatic difference in the resistance to the embers that are being blown at this building. This is just, the best illustration you're going to see of what we're talking about. This translates directly into the real world. This is a photograph. I apologize that it's blurry. It's the best copy I've been able to find of this picture, but this is a firefighter trying to protect a home during the Woolsey fire in 2018, burning on the same day that the campfire was burning in Northern California. This was in Southern California. And you can see exactly where the embers are accumulating, and you can see that it's the bark mulch around the exterior of this stucco home that has ignited, giving this firefighter a real run for his money. This is where we tie the home itself, the home hardening work that we want you all to do with zone 0 in this area around the exterior of the house. That's 6 inches closest to the ground. The separation between the ground, and in this case, you can even see leaf litter on the ground, and the combustible wood shingle siding. That's the critical 6 inches. Our goal is to keep the fire from spreading from the ground to the structure itself, and creating that separation. In this case, it's 6 inches of exposed foundation that separates the place where the embers will accumulate and the siding itself. Very important. This is an example image from a home in Marin County. This is a home, I apologize that I'm not backed up farther in the image, but what you see here is non-combustible siding. This is hardy shingles with an ember and fire resistant vent, a Vulcan brand vent, and a concrete pathway around the exterior of the house. You're going to see more images from this in a second. So those things tie together that the structure, or separate the structure from zone 0. And as we've already covered, mulch. Your choice in mulch within 5 feet of the structure is absolutely critical. This is an image of a gorilla hair, shredded redwood or shredded cedar type mulch, very commonly used. It's has its purpose in certain situations, but this material does not belong adjacent to your house. What we want to see for homeowners, and this is a simple change that you can make around your structure, we want to see you choose rock or gravel mulch. We want to see non-combustible, non-organic materials used as mulch immediately adjacent to the home. Wood chips or bark are out. They have their place in your yard more than 5 feet from your structure. Shredded redwood needs to be applied very carefully. It's the easiest to ignite. I always point out that that's what the Cub Scouts use to start their campfires. So you want to be very judicious with its use around your home if you live in the wildland-urban interface. Here's an image. This is from the Tubbs Fire in Santa Rosa in 2017. This is a home, bark mulch. You can see one of the homes is actually burning in the background, the other is destroyed, and you can see how easily the bark mulch around the outside of the house has ignited. We're talking myth busting tonight, defensible space. That vegetation absolutely needs to go. There's no doubt about it. That's a poor choice in vegetation. But that's not
all that defensible space is. The choice in vegetation is one small aspect of creating defensible space. Defensible space is not just about the plants. It's about the design. It's about the way you maintain that landscape. It's about the features that you build into your landscape, the permanent features, not just the plants. This is a great photograph just 2 years ago at the Kincaid Fire in Sonoma County, showing very clearly how a landscaping feature, in this case a retaining wall, is helping direct heat away from the house. We hear from people all the time that defensible space, creating defensible space, improving their landscaping is gonna ruin their landscaping. They don't want to see the change in their landscaping. One of the best examples we've seen of a transformation in a yard. Here's the before photo. Here's the after photo. Same photo, same angle. The issues that this homeowner were confronted with were an old wooden staircase that was attached to the house, several inches of bark mulch, a bamboo hedge towards the back of the house and along the side of the house, a dead tree in the yard, and frankly, some areas that weren't landscaped, weren't particularly attractive, which changed to this: attractive use of succulents, use of decorative gravel within 5 feet of the structure. Again, we're not asking anybody to clear all of the vegetation in their yard, but we want people to know that a defensible space, again, not just about the landscaping or the vegetation in your yard, the landscaping features, the other features, the combustible materials in your yard can have just as big an impact on whether your home's going to survive. In this case, a fence. We've talked at length about the importance of protecting fences, making sure that fences are not attached to your structure. This is a great example of a yard that has fantastic defensible space in most senses, but that fence carried the fire directly to the home. This is probably the big one, the mother of all myths. My neighbor's tree is an extreme fire hazard. I have an inbox full of messages that say just that. People write to us, they call us, they're concerned about their neighbor's tree, oftentimes concerned about their own trees. We want people to look down, not necessarily up, when they're thinking about their defensible space. This is a photograph of the Scripps Ranch community in Southern California. This is a neighborhood that was surrounded by eucalyptus trees. Every home had trees in their side yard, their front yard, and their backyard, and every tree survived. None of the homes survived. This gets to the point we make often, that your homes are most vulnerable to embers. The defensible space is not harmful to the environment, although there is a myth floating around that creating defensible space creates harm to animals, plants, insects, and the landscape. This is not the case. You can have a healthy native landscape that's lush, well-maintained, and fire resilient. Myth: defensible space means cutting down trees. This is not the case. Again, we're not talking about the trees when we talk about defensible space, at least not the canopies of them. We want you to look towards the ground. We want you to look at the space around those trees. We want you to maintain a healthy natural forest around your property. This is a community that was losing their native oak woodlands to invasive species like French broom, Scotch broom, and acacia. By restoring the meadow that normally had surrounded these oak trees, they're restoring the health of the native oak forest, and they're improving their fire resiliency. The myth is defensible space means my house fend itself. The defensible and defensible space refers to firefighters. Defensible space as a concept goes back decades, and it really goes back to creating a space that's safe for firefighters to operate. It creates a space around a home where firefighters can protect the home, the firefighters do the defending, and the defensible space makes it safe for them to do that. In California, there are a variety of laws and codes and ordinances that address defensible space, and they address the defensible space around your home in using this theory of zones. Zone 0 to 5 feet, is going to be addressed by a new law, a change to California Public Resources Code that'll come into effect starting this year and be phased in over the next 3 years. And that's going to address a number of items that we know now are extremely important to the survival of your home, the combustibles within 5 feet of your walls. Zone 1, 5 feet to 30 feet, is a space where the CAL FIRE and the state law addresses it directly as the lean, clean, and green zone. This is an area where we want to see no dead vegetation at all. Grasses must be cut to 3 inches or less. Trees need to be limbed up 6 feet from the ground or a third the height of the tree. And we want to see spacing put between shrubs and plants. From 30 to 100 feet, the law requires that you provide basic maintenance, not removal of trees, removal of dead vegetation only. You don't necessarily, under the law, need to cut your dry grasses from 30 to 100 feet, although we strongly recommend that. When we look at this in relation to how homes actually ignite, I'm going to close with this. It's a reminder that 60 to 90% of homes lost during wildfires ignite from the embers that land on them or within 5 feet of them. There's nothing in the current law that addresses this issue. So when we talk about defensible space, when we talk about defensible space as a law, when we look at it as a law enforcement issue, we're really focusing on 10% of the homes that are lost during wildfires. But it's important to note that 100% of the homes that don't have defensible space are vulnerable during a wildfire.
I hope we all got some ideas about defensible space there. Here at Fire Safe Marin, we're rather enamored of the whole Mythbusters concept. And I think you'll be seeing a lot more of that in our future webinars. Because if you really, we're hitting the whole ember thing hard, because if you understand the role of embers and how they ignite your home, it makes it so much easier to think your way through the improvements you want to make to your property. So, Jordan, one of the questions I had from the audience is, how do I deal with my neighbor who doesn't take any of this seriously?
Well, I think Todd mentioned, his inbox full of emails regarding vegetation on neighbors' properties, public open space lands, it could be national parks or open space or state parks, and the concern of the vegetation that exists outside of their property. And I think it can be a challenge in a lot of ways, because there's a difference between something that's an actual threat potentially to your home, especially from a fire threat, and something that maybe people don't like there for various reasons and they want to use fire as the excuse. So I think we need to be very careful as we engage with our neighbors and try to encourage a community-based protection and prevention and preparedness and fuel reduction, that it really is a collaborative effort amongst neighbors. Because I don't think in this session today, we don't really talk about the fuel that is really driving most of those fires. When you see that picture that was down in Southern California, and it's once a house ignites, the house becomes the fuel, and the house spreads embers to existing fuel, to existing homes, and the spread can be from the vegetation isn't burning. So there's some embers that are catching the next home and the next home and the next home, and those are embers and heat being generated from neighbors. So looking at it in the totality is really important, that we just isolate ourselves into our property boundary that has our redwood fence and our garden around it. But I think Todd's point about looking down is a critical one, right? Like, we have this tendency that maybe we always are looking up for hazards because we're worried about trees falling and other things that, trees can present a hazard to us. But we really need to focus on, what we can control. And there isn't a lot in place right now that gives the ability for fire jurisdictions. There is some, but it can be quite cumbersome and potentially litigious when we start asking people or requiring people to remove things that are at the request of their neighbors. So we just ask people to really start small on this. This really is a paradigm shift for us here in Marin, right? And I love my garden, and I know my parents' garden in San Geronimo. I look at it and it's a peaceful and idyllic place, but there's some real things in there that we need to start rethinking. We really need to be careful about throwing stones as well. So the first thing we do, that if we get a significant or request from someone about a concern, is usually our response is, okay, we'll come out and take a look, but we're also going to look at your home as well, right? And I think I don't have, Todd is live maybe on this, but throughout our inspections we did last year on the defensible space program, we have about a a 70%, that it varies by community, about a 70% non-compliance rate, right? So that means 70% of our homes don't meet basic level compliance when it comes to the defensible space code. And it's very important to acknowledge and recognize that these are the basic level stuff, what the 0 to 5 feet, the defensible space zone. This is just the entry level to starting to protect your home, right? This isn't getting into the next level up where we really can look at some of the other building construction stuff and our vegetation layout. So Rich, we do want to encourage people to be engaged with their neighbors. We want to make sure that it doesn't become adversarial or people are pointing fingers over fences. We want them to try to work together and collaborate and come up with solutions on their own. And hopefully the fire departments and Fire Safe Marin and other agencies that are responsible do work collaboratively with the individual. So a quick example is on much of the open space property. I'll use open space to represent state parks, national parks, and county open space land. If there's identified vegetation that was in the 100-foot defensible space zone that is a threat or that people feel is a threat to their home, there is a process where those agencies will allow you to come onto their property and remove that vegetation. So you're in essence, taking care of it yourself with their support. So I hope that answers the questions. I got a little off tangent, as you know I do at times, Rich, but I think it's important that we just really focus on people working together and working as a community and as neighbors, and we don't keep looking over the fence and wondering why someone else isn't doing something when most of us, myself included, have things we need to work on around our homes and little things that we can do in this 0 to 5 feet and the simple home hardening stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Jordan. Related to this, I think one of the absolute best programs that's being funded by the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is the Defensible Space Evaluation Program. This didn't exist before the passage of Measure C, and I think it's had a big impact. And I think that will also help address some of what's the question about neighbors and so forth. Can you explain how that program is going to be working this year in West Marin?
Let me take myself off of mute there. So in West Marin, we have a collaborative defensible space team right now, and it consists of a organization, the fire departments that are Marin County Fire Department, the Ross Valley Fire Department, Central Marin Fire Agencies, which is Larkspur and Corte Madera, Kentfield Fire, and then also the West Marin, Bolinas, Stinson, Muir Beach, and who am I missing? And Inverness. So last year we actually inspected every single home, and I won't speak for Bolinas and Stinson, we didn't do all the homes, but all the homes on the Inverness Peninsula and in Point Reyes had their inspection. So our goal at this point is to try to inspect and have an inspection every other year. So every other year for a home, because we find that there's not a lot of changes that go on from year to year, right? That us coming and saying, oh, don't forget to cut your grass. That's not our best time served, right? That's not the time well spent for us. So we do have capacity for individuals who aren't scheduled for an inspection this year to reach out to us and have our local fire station personnel come out and do inspections. And then, so we will be doing inspections in Stinson, Bolinas, and Muir Beach this year. And then the county also has responsibilities. We're going to focus our county our inspections in some of our lands and properties in Southern Marin and San Rafael area, because we didn't inspect them last year. We inspected the year before. That group has, just so you know, there are 25. We have 25 defensible space inspectors, and you'll see them throughout the community. And so they're all organized together, kind of one approach, really focusing still on the education piece, but we're going to start just trying to hold people accountable for meeting the basic level codes as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that kind of addresses the issue of if there's a serious problem out there, we really have eyes in the field right now to see it. And so if there's something that's truly a threat to a community, now we have in place a system that can identify that and really work with that homeowner to make the change. It does come up that sometimes with the best of intentions, somebody feels like, wow, that bush at my neighbor's house or the tree or something else, boy, that's going to burn my house down. And that's an understandable concern. But sometimes when we actually get out there, we realize in the scale of things, we can work through that. But an egregious problem, I think we have the mechanism in place to really deal with that now. And that's again, thanks to the MWPA for that. That's a great program. kind of related to all of this is, a lot of this is fuels. And so we have a chipper program coming. And how does that tie into all this? And what's the chipper service going to look like in West Marin?
Well, we have really fortunate this year that Fire Safe Marin, with the support of the Marine Wildfire Prevention Authority, is upping the chipper ante, so to speak. And so pretty much every home in Marin, regardless of the jurisdiction you live in, and I don't know if we can get that link up right now, Rich, if someone can put up, Jen or someone, the link to the site that shows where you can find out when your chipper days are coming. But every home will have an option. It's already scheduled for 2 curbside chipping opportunities for a contractor to come to your resident and chip material that you put out on the curb for them. And that's a significant increase over years past. And it's been that's a really great thing. And then we also have the capacity, especially with firewise communities or just organized communities, to support with additional chipper days. If there's a communal need, if there's a collaborative need where neighbors are coming together and doing work, we want to support that. So we have capacity to go out and provide additional support with chippers, either agency owned ones, but most likely contractors. So if you go to the Fire Safe Marin website, there is a link under the chipper program, and you can put your address in right now and you can sign up. There's 2 days available. And I think looks like Jen just put it over there in the chat bar. So and we hope to expand on that moving into future years, but we're really comfortable with where this is going. I'm really excited about the opportunity.
Great. So that's chipperday.org, no, .com, excuse me, chipperday.com/Marin. I know it went into our chat. I think we have to get it out through Q&A to the audience, but you can go to the Fire Safe Marin website and find it. And once again, that's another fantastic MWPA program that I think really is going to have a lot of benefit for everybody. Okay, let's take a minute now, and we're going to hear from somebody else, which is Bruce Goines, is the president of the Marin Wildfire Protection Authority. And he and Mark Brown, who you've already been introduced to, the executive officer, are going to tell you a little bit more about MWPA, how it got started, what it's all about, and where it's going.
Hi, my name is Bruce Goines. I'm honored to be serving as the president of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. I came here with 45 years as a wildland firefighter and a forester, and managing statewide programs to help communities reduce their wildfire risk. Here in Marin, we're in a very special place. We have the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, which is a 10-year initiative, and all of our tax dollars are being invested back into the community to help reduce the risk of the inevitable wildfire. I want to just give you a little history, very brief, as to why the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority was created. I think we all know the fires, catastrophic fires that have occurred all around us, to the north, to the east, to the south. Particularly last year was particularly bad. Your County Board of Supervisors had some vision after the Tubbs fire, which resulted in catastrophic events for Santa Rosa and Coffee Park. Your Board of Supervisors commissioned a group of firemen, law enforcement officials, city managers, and county administrators to take a look at what happened up in the North Bay, and what can we learn from that? What can we do to reduce the risk of something like that occurring here in Marin County? So they put together a team who produced a report. It's called the 2017 Lessons Learned Report, which you can find on the MWPA website if you're interested. But the bottom line was, it said that we needed to coalesce to bring all the resources together, all the fire agencies together, all the cities together, and coalesce and figure out and take an aggressive program to reduce our risks. Secondly, the next year, the county supervisors, again, with that report, the 2019 civil grand jury took up this topic. And the civil grand jury affirmed the 2017 lessons report. And in essence, they said, we need to take this one step further. We need to develop a reliable funding source, and we need for all of our fire agencies to coalesce under a joint powers authority. Then came in 2020 Measure C, and there are a handful of people in the room that you're in who were integral to Measure C coming up to the ballot. Morning, noon, and night, they talked with fire districts, city managers, And in essence, Measure C was passed in 2020. It was one of 4 tax initiatives, the only one that passed. And now we have a 10-year opportunity, $20 million a year, $200 million, which we expect to match through matching funds. But here we are, $20 million a year. The opportunity, 60% of these funds are for vegetation management and clearing, preparing evacuation routes, fire detection and public education. 20% is for defensible space evaluations, and 20% is for local mitigation projects. It's a phenomenal opportunity. This is the opportunity for you, the citizen. I believe your County Board of Supervisors has done their work. I think the fire chiefs are doing their work, and city managers. And this is the time for you, the public, to basically take responsibility and address the hazards and the risks and potentially reduce the potential consequences of a very catastrophic event. So thanks very much.
Hi, my name is Mark Brown, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Officer for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. That's after 30 years of serving with the Marin County Fire Department and retiring as the Deputy Fire Chief. At the MWPA, our current focus is home hardening, because what we've learned during catastrophic fires and urban conflagrations is that it's the homes that turn into the primary carrier of fire. And if we can eliminate homes from catching on fire, we can start decreasing the catastrophic nature of these fires. So we want our homes to be hardened so they don't ignite. The next step is that we want a 5-foot non-combustible zone that surrounds our homes so that when embers land around our home, there's nothing to catch them on fire and then catch the house on fire. And then we want to look at smart firescape landscaping to create defensible space. We're not asking people to remove their vegetation. We're asking them to look at how they arrange their vegetation, both horizontally and vertically. We want an ember to land, preferably self-extinguish. But if it doesn't self-extinguish, we want whatever it catches on fire doesn't spread to something else and it just stays within that area. And then finally, we are focused on an evacuation route clearing. There's just so much work that needs to be done. We are so far behind in our vegetation management at a countywide level. Our primary goal is to get people out safely. So we are focusing hard on our evacuation route clearing. To that end, we've purchased the Zone Haven evacuation management platform so we can streamline our evacuation systems. They are not replacing anything that we have currently in place. They aren't replacing, Zone Haven will not replace our notification systems. It will not replace law enforcement or fire going door to door, knocking on your door, telling you it's time to leave. But what it does, it gives us more information so that we can plan better prior to an emergency and during an emergency so we can get people out safer. We are also conducting a study of our ingress and egress routes throughout the county. That way we can evaluate which routes need to be worked on and we can prioritize and get the routes that need the work the most done right away. Our current schedule of projects includes chipper days to support the homeowners with their defensible space work. Low-income defensible space grants, so those who don't have the financial resources to do the work around their home can tap into those grants in order to make their home safe. Along with their home being safe, that makes the rest of the community safe. And then we are looking at creating home hardening matching grants. So residents that want to work on their home, make their homes hardened so they are less likely to ignite, we will match what they are spending in order for them to improve their homes. We discussed the evacuation route clearing. We see that as one of our most important things that we'll be doing this year. And then we will be working on fuel reduction projects in and around our homes near the open space, the wildland-urban interface boundary. We want to create a space where a catastrophic fire could come into and then actually decrease in intensity as it enters into our homes. And we're going to do that with shaded fuel breaks along that wildland-urban interface boundary. And then you're participating in one of our primary tools right now, and that is public education. And what we found is the more the public understands about wildfire and what they can do and what their responsibility is for wildland fire, the safer our communities will be. And thank you for attending. Thank you for being a part of the solution, and thank you for helping decrease the risk to wildfire in Marin.
All right, so we're back, and I really think this is a good time to thank all of you, all of our residents of Marin who voted for Measure C, which is what is funding the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And as you can see, I think the funds are being put to good use It's really just getting ramped up, and there's a lot of good programming, a lot of work coming down the road with that. So really, we do want to thank all of you for having made it possible. And it is in good hands with people like Supervisor Rodoni and President Goins and Mark Brown and others working very hard over there. So Mark pointed out that home hardening is very important. 5 or 6 years ago, this wasn't the thing. It was all about defensible space in those days. And we were really learning from these fires we've had in Northern California over the last 5 years, how important home hardening is. So let's take an opportunity to take a look at a video that will explain go a little bit more depth on this.
You need to harden your home. That's why you're here tonight. I'll just point out that the video that's playing there in the background, that's a home in Napa County, Oakville. It's one of the highest homes anywhere in Napa County. It was impacted by this fire, the one that you see there, in October of 2016. This was about a 50-acre fire that started on the roadside and burned directly up to the house, impacted the house. The house escaped this fire undamaged. There was no insurance claim on this property besides a solar panel array that was down the hill in the bushes. The house itself undamaged. 1 year later, almost to the day the Nuns fire started, it was one of the North Bay fires. Started overnight, burned 50,000 acres, and on day 3 of the fire, it impacted this house directly from the other side. The side that you don't see burning here burned 1 year later. The house again escaped undamaged. The reasons for that are the way the house was designed, the materials that were used to build the house, and careful thought to building a fire-resistant structure.
The best place to start when talking about your ignition zones is the actual home and structure itself. And that's where the term home hardening comes in. Home hardening refers to the maintenance of your structure and the upkeep, as well as the building materials that you've applied to your home.
One of the most interesting concepts that have come out of the studies that have been done on the fires, the large fires that have happened throughout the United States over the past couple years, is this idea that it's not the flame front that actually destroys your house. It's the flying ember storm that will do that damage. So hardening your home actually becomes a very, very important part of this whole wildfire preparedness plan. When it comes to home hardening, there's two aspects or two ways to look at it. The first is the actual construction of the building itself, and when we look at that side, we see things such as the materials that the roof is made of, the material that your siding is made of, what is actually touching the ground, and we also look at the soffits of the house, for example. Are they closed in or are they open? And then the other aspect that we look at is maintenance. So when we talk about maintenance, we're talking about things like, what are you storing under your deck? What do you have up in your gutters? Do you have leaves that have fallen in there that need to be taken care of? Do you need to clean off your roof? If you have a log cabin, are all the holes filled in with putty? The house behind me has some really great examples of home hardening from the construction standpoint. Right next to the ground, there's nothing that's combustible there. The rock goes clear down to the ground, and for the first several feet coming up, there's no way for a fire on the ground to get into the house. The siding above the rock is limited combustible. That means that it does have the ability to burn, but it's treated with a substance that will prevent it from actually sustaining fire. A lot of the times people like to have a wood siding on their house, and that's okay as long as it's installed correctly and you are using the correct materials. So if you look at the soffits in this house, they're boxed in, and what that does is it protects those areas from collecting any of these flying embers that happen to come along during a wildfire event. And then especially nice on this house is the metal and asphalt shingle roof. This house has a combined, a combo style covering, which is just fine. Both of them are very good at keeping those embers from having a place where a fire can start. Having a redwood deck or a deck that's made of combustible materials is not the end of the world. If you do have that type of deck, you certainly don't need to tear it out. You just need to do a little bit of maintenance on it. Make sure it's treated with a non-combustible sealant. From a home hardening aspect, maintenance is probably the most important thing you can do. No matter what your house is made out of, no matter what material you have on the side of your house, what material your deck is made out of, or what material you have on the roof, that has to be maintained. If you look around your house and you find places where the wind blows leaves, those are the same places where embers are going to come in a firestorm. And those are the same places where those embers will sit there and smolder until the conditions are just right for them to ignite whatever they've landed in. Another large risk for your house is openings. Any opening that goes into your attic, any vents in your soffits or vents even in your gables or on the side of your house, they have the potential of collecting flying embers. Back in the day, we used to put 1/4 inch mesh on these openings to keep things from getting in. The latest science from the large fires that we've had within the United States over the past couple years has shown us that that 1/4 inch mesh is not tight enough.
I am inspired by the Park City Fire Department, and I'm going to harden my home. I'm going to change my attic vents, and I'm going to put screening underneath my decks. And I'm going to teach you how to do it. Let's go. First thing you need to know is I am not a handyman, but I'm going to go for this because I need to make my house more safe. Remove that screen. I can do it. You can do it. Embers out. Measure it first. That is a 2-inch opening, and there is a stock 2-inch vent for you at the hardware store. You're going to use those pliers to pull that wire. You're going to use that hammer to tap in the new vent, and you're going to use that sandpaper to clear out paint and gunk so that vent slides in easily. They are a little fragile. Don't hit them too hard. There's the vents you have to choose from. I chose those Ember vents with 16-inch screen on the backside. Vulcan vents have a different system, and I'll show you. There's the ones I got, 44 of them for around my house, about $1.50 each. This is the Vulcan vent. It's got louvers that keep out the embers, lots of teeny louvers. And on the other side is a honeycomb that will melt if it is exposed to high heat. These are double the price of the vents I went with, so I went on a budget. But I did sand them in carefully, and I worked hard to get them in, and I sanded, and I sanded, and I sanded to get them in. And once you've sanded enough, they slide right in. If you do not sand enough, they will bend and bend. Bend and bent. Here we are. Also, as you make your way around your house, it's a good idea to get some caulk and just fill in holes, any kind of crack or groove that you think maybe embers could embed in, and start a smoldering fire. It's thorough, it's good, and now you're done. Look at those vents. The louvers are pointed down. They're in. It's time for some more paint and sanding and make my house more beautiful. But before I do that, I want to work on my low deck out back. It needs some love too. I went and got some screening materials. I got a roll of 1/8-inch stainless steel metal mesh. Easy for me to say. And then I went to my crusty deck and I turned it a little less crusty. I cleaned it up and I got ready to apply the mesh. I measured down and I cut extra. Mesh is malleable. I measured long. It can be formed to the space, but if it's too small, you can't fit it in. And here's some tools I used. First, I used that grinder. Now, everybody doesn't have a grinder. You can also use some tin snips, and I'll show you what that looks a little later. As I grinded, it was a little wild and fast, and sparks were flying. Not recommended for the dry season. This is a winter project, winter, spring. You don't want to do it during fire season. These are the tin snips that worked really well. It cut like butter and it was under control. I probably will use these from the future. And here we are underneath. I tacked it up with the staples and just made sure it all fit. And then I came back with my screw gun and made sure it was tight up against the wood. We don't want embers to slip through. Really what you're doing is you're making sure that no leaf matter or sticks or twigs will blow in during our fog season when the wind howls and would push in unwanted material. And then if you happen to have an ember storm, then that material could kindle and catch this deck. And then I put some rock down even to make sure it would stay down and it wouldn't be up against the dirt and it wouldn't rot as quickly. And this is what it looks like when it's done. It's ready for some more hardscaping. I did put some weed cloth down so the weeds wouldn't come up again. And you can do this as well. Good job, people. You can do it. You know what the steps take. And thank you for making Marin a little bit more fire safe.
All right, welcome back. Well, you can see we had a little bit of fun creating that video there. First, we had a big debate about whether we should be using the Park City video or not, but we just thought it was really well done, and it's hard to find a house that incorporates so many of the features as that one did. Doesn't really look typical Marin. It was a little bit of snow coming down there, but I think the point was very well done of the various features you're looking for on the house. And then we had our we had Aaron, who was very nice to volunteer to give the idea of what a do-it-yourselfer can do. The fact is, it's a lot of these things really are pretty simple. Didn't look like much, wasn't maybe the most professional job ever done, but made all the difference in the world protecting from the embers. You're probably getting tired of hearing about embers, but we're kind of driving that point home to a purpose, because that is really what you need to have in your mind when you're trying to harden your home. So Jordan, with all that in mind, if you were to make a recommendation to the homeowners, there's a lot of things they can do with defensible space, home hardening, all stuff. If they had to be one area in home hardening just to get started, where do you think that would be?
Well, I think, as you can see, even that video, which is very do-it-yourself oriented and quite feasible, it takes a little bit. You got to have tools. You got to go to the lumberyard. I think, the two areas, and they're the same, is the immediate dry and dead vegetation immediately around your home. Can be rakes with your hand, with simple garden shears, right? The vegetation, leaf litter, whatever. And then the big one, it's really a challenge, and we're trying to address this, and we're gonna need to get creative, is gutters, right? It's not easy to go clean your gutters. Most people's homes, you have to get on a ladder, and then when you have a second story, that is, it's not realistic for even the handiest and the most skilled of homeowners to clean a second story gutter. So having gutter guards installed on your home is crucial. A lot of our native trees do, basically shed leaves all year long, the coast live oak, as well as the redwoods, the Doug firs, et cetera. So I think just being really simple and doing what you can around the immediate, that 0 to 5 feet on the ground, and just taking dead things out and having some snips. And I think the one piece too, Rich, is also ensuring that you have your driveway, and that's a big part of this too. So sorry, that was 3 things you asked me for one. I would just say what you can do walking around your yard, filling up your green bin. We all have green bins. If you filled up a green bin a week, if you made sure that every Sunday or every Monday or Wednesday, whatever your trash day is, that you were filling your green bin all summer long, you could do a lot to improve the safety of your home.
Great. So West Marin's kind of interesting. We're really fortunate living here in Marin, and many, many years ago, the environmental movement almost got started in this county. And one of the first things they really did was to prevent massive development in West Marin. So in some ways, West Marin's a little bit older. So is there some characteristic of the West Marin housing that might make it a little bit more vulnerable to some of these home hardening issues?
Well, most definitely. And I think, as you said, I know I'm growing up in the San Geronimo Valley, and I believe my house was originally a Boy Scout cabin, so that those original homes that were built and then or cabins that were expanded on piece by piece, sometimes maybe Dennis is listening without permits, right? There's a lot of that that's gone on in West Marin, so we don't have an opportunity to hold people to building standards as they get as they're updated. So I think the construction of the buildings and the amount of, we still do have houses with shake roofs on them, right? Wood shake roofs, and the shake siding isn't as much of a threat if you have good vegetation clearance around your home, but just the construction and the vents and the spacing and where they are tucked on the hillside. If you're in Inverness or if you're in Fairfax or in San Geronimo or Lagunitas, so the precarious nature of some of these homes that have massive amounts of vegetation around them with poor access. So it's going to be hard for fire departments to get in there. So just the layout, the streets and the infrastructure were not designed for our current way of life, right? And the size of the homes, the number of people and the vehicles and the fire equipment and apparatus that needs to get there. So that's where I think we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of having evacuation routes and pre-thinking that stuff, because we might not be able to put out every fire in a timely manner, and we might not be able to save your home, but we really want to save the individuals in the homes and their precious possessions if they can.
So Jordan, when the defensible space evaluations are being done, will they also be looking at some of the basic home hardening issues that are there?
Yes and no. Yes, they will be that, but it's not part of the fire code. A big part of this is to make sure that people are meeting the fire code. But we're really excited partnering with MWPA. We're developing a new software that's collecting the data that we're going out into the field. So those that are getting inspections this year will have a much improved product coming their way. It's not going to be the middle section of a triplicate form that's been filled out. It's going to actually have a code that you're going to go to, and you're going to be able to access your defensible space inspection for your home. And there's going to be a lot of additional information outside of the traditional defensible space stuff pertinent to your home, and then links on how you can make improvements based on what the inspectors are seeing. So yes, most definitely. But it's not, those things are not enforceable. That's fire code stuff that's really only enforceable, when there's permits, and it's not retroactively enforceable. But they will be, and they'll be there to talk to people and give them solutions and options for sure.
Great, thanks, Jordan. Well, the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is community preparedness. And when we were thinking about creating this series, one of the reasons we're doing 5 different ones is because the Marin communities are really very different. If you live out in Tamales or Bolinas or Woodacre, that's a lot different than living in, say, the flats of Corte Madera or Sausalito and whatnot. So each community has its own character. Here at Fire Safe Marin, we really do believe, though, that the most effective way to make change, and we've talked a little bit about this already, is at the community level. It's great that we're providing this information, but it's neighbor talking to neighbor. It's working out those details that are out there at that local level. It's encouraging people to take the actions or helping them to do the things that need to be done that really makes all the difference. So let's talk a little bit about how communities can organize and how the strength of the community can, in fact, make it better prepared. Jen?
Hi, my name is Nancy. I'm the leader of the local firewise site for the neighborhood.
Okay.
And we're all about helping each other fire harden our homes and our gardens.
Oh, well, I could sure use help. I mean, I don't know what you can do, but it's such a mess down there.
Oh, that would be wonderful, because we are looking to come together and help out with some gardens that need some extra love and care. And is that something that we could do?
That would be fantastic.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. When do you do that?
Well, we try to do it every Saturday or every other Saturday, or
Okay.
just when people can make it, and some people might be able to show up on Saturday, and I think we can pull it together. Would that be good?
That would be fantastic.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So 10 o'clock on Saturday?
Wonderful, yeah. I'll see you there.
Great. Okay,
thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Ronan, I think Finn's gonna need a walk. Can you take him?
Oh, yeah. Hey, guys, this is an alert from Alert Marin. There's a fire in the area. The embers shower could happen anytime with these high winds. We need to go.
Okay, let's get going. It's a red flag day, so I've got everything right there inside the door. We've got the to-go bag. I think I've got my glasses. I've got medicine, ID, You two get the puppy in the kennel and load him in the car.
Let's make sure Miss Benson, our neighbor, also has gotten the alert and that she's aware that we have to get going.
Great. Let's get our masks, get long sleeve shirts, hats. Let's get going.
Hey, Miss Benson, we just got an alert from Alert Marin. There's a fire in the area, and
Where?
we're going to get some ember showers. It's right up on the hill.
Oh my
It's
God.
time to go. Can you get your important papers
Yes.
and your medicines or anything else you need?
I don't have a car.
You could fit in with us. Why don't you come with us then?
Okay. I'll be ready in a few minutes.
All right, sounds
okay.
good.
You want me to get him?
Welcome to FireSafe Marin's webinar series.
Our fire season has increased by about 75 days a year.
This is how you will receive your emergency notifications.
We continued to go away from the fire, and at this point we started realizing it was around us. We're seeing flames.
We at FireSafe Marin are excited to be sponsoring a chipper event in your neighborhood. This video shares some simple guidelines for you to prepare your chipper pile to ensure that it will be picked up.
Wildfires have always been a part of California, but recently we've had more fires and they've been more destructive than ever before. That's why we've created this program for you. It's called Ready, Set, Go. When we think of defensible space, it's helpful to imagine different zones, depending on the distance from the building we want to protect. Today, we're only going to talk about the most important of the defensible space zones. Studies have shown that 60 to 90% of homes destroyed in wildfires are ignited by tiny embers.
Hi, I'm Faye Mark from the University of California Marin Master Gardeners. We're often asked the question, what are the safest plants? Truth is, all plants burn. When it comes to fire-smart landscaping, it's much more important to consider where a plant is situated and how it is maintained than to assume some plants are better than others.
In the long run, loss of pollinators could create a shift in vegetation with plant reproduction favored by wind pollination. Wind-pollinated species include grasses and pine trees, which tend to be more fire-prone. Fire safety can be both beautiful and support biodiversity. We can have it all with careful planning.
How does working as a community help improve fire safety?
You can't do everything. You can work on your own property and do everything you need, vegetation management, house hardening, and then if your neighbors don't know what to do or are unaware of the whole process, you're still vulnerable. So when you work together as a neighborhood, you're able to learn how to do it and what to do, and everybody becomes jointly embarked on the same project. I also noticed a very surprising element about forming a firewise community, and that is that even people who aren't actively members of our group, they might be in a nearby neighborhood or even in our neighborhood but not participating. Once they see us start doing the work, it's a process of modeling. All of a sudden, without us saying anything, they're doing the work themselves, and areas that were completely overgrown are within a month or two suddenly getting clearer, and you can see that they're aware that this is an issue and they're taking it on board and doing it on their own initiative. So that has been a very gratifying area for just seeing how people are responding to the whole neighborhood at work.
It is making sure that everybody gets the information that we want to get to them about a chipper day or a broom pull.
The hardest part is the initial outreach. If you have it on your mind you want to form a community and you haven't done this kind of work before, it can be a little intimidating to reach out. And I think that's the hardest step, is to reach out and find some like-minded neighbors who are also worried about it. the way we did it was we simply put a notice on next door saying, "Hello neighbor, are you concerned about wildfire in your neighborhood?" and suggested a meeting time. And the next step is, having got a few neighbors involved, is we did some door knocking. Obviously in the time of COVID, it's hard to do that. But you can leave information on people's doorknobs or doorsteps, and built our database. And that's really very important, because once you have your database, you have the people that you reach out to. They don't have to be the people who come to the meetings. They just are people who are interested in the topic. And then once we're all connected, we started the process, and it was very straightforward.
The firewise community is a way of getting people to address a problem. So people looking at Paradise, looking at the Napa and Santa Rosa fires, were ready to say, yeah, it's possible we could have a fire here. Let's do something about it. And it's not onerous, and maybe if we work together we can figure out what to do best.
We've introduced you to what community preparedness looks like, yet we know it's quite another thing to embark on this endeavor in your own community. So, FireSafe Marin has created what we call the Universal Firewise Activities, or UFAs. These 7 activities will help you build a robust fire-adapted community. The first UFA is to develop a comprehensive contact list of residents. You can reach out to your neighbors on Nextdoor by posting an announcement inviting people to join your efforts. You can print out door hangers and place them on gates or under doormats. Once you get an initial interested group, host a social event. You can do this via Zoom and show one of FireSafe Marin's videos and have a Q&A after. Or, once it's safe, you can host a neighborhood block party and spend a few minutes letting people know things that they can do to make your community safer from wildfire and inviting them to join. One of the best ways, of course, is to reach out to the neighbors that you are already friendly with. Share your ideas. Surely they know other neighbors who may want to join efforts to make the neighborhood safer from the threat of wildfire. Holding regular meetings keeps the efforts rolling. Some communities do this monthly, others quarterly. It depends on what your community wants to do. You can hold meetings via Zoom to talk about concerns and activities. Try showing one of our 5-minute videos posted on our YouTube channel and have a discussion after. Of course, when it's safe, you can hold meetings in your home or on the patio. But I have to say, Zoom has been a bit easier. No need to tidy up or rush out the door. A key aspect of being a fire-adapted community is education. FireSafe Marin has several resources for you to pull from. Our website has a nationwide audience owing to its depth of information. There, you can find printable materials such as our evacuation checklist and homeowner's guide to wildfire preparedness. Over 75 videos and webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. Guest speakers include top fire scientists, veteran firefighters, and the latest information in the world of fire and wildland-urban interface. Don't forget to refer people to our Facebook page for quick updates. Fuel reduction can go a long way to make our neighborhood safer for members. Encouraging participation in free annual Chipper Day events is a good way to make some headway. You can email those on your contact list, distribute door hangers, post the event on Nextdoor and Facebook, and post flyers in community hotspots. Holding annual neighborhood walks to reassess your progress and to note areas that still need improvement is a good way to keep current. Are flammable juniper and Italian cypress disappearing? Do you need to increase efforts on a neglected aspect of home hardening? Celebrate your successes too. By holding an annual evacuation drill, you are encouraging people to prepare before it's time to go. Preparing a to-go kit, dressing for safety, getting your family and pets prepared, and knowing your evacuation route beforehand goes a long way towards a quick and safe evacuation with less anxiety. Start with our training presentation and follow one of the drills outlined in our evacuation template. Notify your local fire department of serious hazard through their wildfire mitigation specialists. Get to know these folks. They perform defensible space inspections and are your go-to people for hazards in your community. By using these UFAs, you'll be able to engage, educate, and activate your community to make your community safer from the dangers of wildfire.
All right, back again. So just a couple comments on those videos. The first one was kind of a fun thing, meant to be sort of a parable, but it is absolutely true that on all these larger wildfire events, many people are saved because a neighbor simply gave some assistance to their next door neighbor who maybe doesn't have a car or have mobility issues and whatnot. So that has saved a lot of lives. It's just as basic and as simple as what we showed over there. The second thing, kind of a little pitch for Fire Safe Marin. I do hope you'll tune into our webinar series. It comes once a month. The schedule's on the website, and we really are trying to make it pretty interesting. We have some great presenters for that. But probably our biggest program that we're really pushing related to community preparedness is the Firewise USA program. It really is encouraging this organization at the local level. You're much more likely to do something if you're working with your neighbor or a neighbor gave you the idea, or you realize that, hey, I need to do this to keep up with everybody else out here. It makes a big impact. And then we don't want it to be an empty program. So, well, if I become Firewise, what do I do? Am I just called Firewise? So we came up with those universal Firewise activities. If you really take a hard look at them, they're not difficult to do. If every community was doing those things, we would all actually be much better prepared, and it takes very little effort, doesn't cost any money to do it. So West Marin is, because it's large, it's a little bit more scattered out there, has been an area which has taken a little while to begin to develop the Firewise communities. Jordan, have you seen some changes and some more enthusiasm for the program out there?
Well, most definitely. I think as it's kind of, Marin has a very high Firewise rate compared to, I think probably has the most of any county in the country, maybe not anymore, but I would fathom it does at this point. So yeah, there's actually a big push right now for all the San Geronimo Valley to be engaged or participate in a Firewise group, which adds a number of homes. And there are, lots of interest in the Firewise. I think it's important to note too that you don't have to be Firewise to be Firewise, right? And so I think that's a really important thing for us to understand. And there's lots of opportunities for all of our residents, regardless, if they're engaged as a single property owner or, with a couple of their neighbors and they want to reach out and do some work or get some assistance, we're going to support them just as much. So, the Firewise is really, I think the biggest thing Rich is doing is it's really bringing neighborhoods together a little bit over kind of bringing them around the campfire, so to speak. And the other piece is, with the bringing everyone together, it's going to expand out to other things, right? And there's, other community-based potential threats, if it's, from floods or earthquakes or other potential disasters, as well as good stuff too, right? Hopefully once we're a little more COVID free, community interaction and neighborhood interaction. So we're seeing a lot of involvement and a lot of engagement. And we also ask that people be patient, as it's really not a fire department. The Firewise program is not a county fire department. It's not a local fire jurisdiction thing. It's a national program run out of Colorado. We're here to support and provide assistance and guidance where we can, but we're not the keepers of it. We don't do the follow up on it, and et cetera. So.
Yeah, great. Well, related to that, that really is what Fire Safe Marin is doing. If you have any interest in organizing around that, we're here to help you. Maybe you decide not, as Jordan pointed out, maybe you decide not to become formally Firewise, but I think those Firewise activities would benefit anybody, and we're there to help you get organized. We have monthly meetings where all the Firewise leadership gets together that are really well attended, 60, 70 people at least. And people are sharing best practices of what's going on around the county. And it's just a great source of information, and hope you'll be able to take advantage of it. Okay, so let's go on to the last segment. We're getting there. And this one, we've talked a lot of generalities, but there's no substitution for personal preparedness. For myself, I'm a retired firefighter from San Francisco, but I worked in the city's Office of Emergency Services for several years there. And at that time in San Francisco, wildfire is not exactly their focus, certainly earthquakes and all and whatnot, but personal preparedness was everything. Individuals need to take some individual responsibility. So let's go through and talk a little bit about that, and we'll get the video started here.
In the following section, you will hear about personal and evacuation preparedness. Long before a wildfire strikes, all Marin residents need to take action to be ready. There are many simple things that you can do today. The best advice to help you remain safe during a wildfire is to evacuate early.
When we discuss wildfire preparedness, especially how it relates to evacuation, we like to break it down into three topics: ready, set, go. This is a national program that follows the ready, set, go mantra, and it's important. It works. It helps us keep organized. The ready is discussing preparedness, things you do in advance of a fire. Being set is the situational awareness that you need to have when a wildfire is burning in your neighborhood, but really anytime during fire season. And go refers to going early, making the decision to leave. When's it time to evacuate? What situational awareness is when we're referring to a wildfire. Understanding what weather can trigger wildfires, contribute to especially the catastrophic wildfires, is so important.
Hello, I'm Captain Oscar Arenas with the Ross Valley Fire Department. You may have seen signs like this at the entrance of your neighborhood. These signs means that a red flag warning has been declared by the National Weather Service. When that happens, Marin County fire chiefs consult with each other to determine which areas of Marin are most at risk. The chiefs then issue an order for signs to be posted. During red flag warnings, extreme caution is urged for all residents because fires are more likely to ignite, and those that do are more likely to spread and be more difficult to control. Red flag warning conditions are typically related to wind events lasting at least 8 hours. During these events, vegetation is very dry, humidity is low, and no rain has occurred in the last 24 hours. Relative humidity and wind speed are the primary factors driving a red flag warning declaration. Red flag warnings are designated for a specific span of time. The warnings remain in effect until it expires, is canceled, or upgraded.
Situational awareness also has to do with how you get your alerts and warnings. You need to take steps in advance, like now, today, if you haven't already, to ensure that you're going to receive the electronic warnings that we send out. In Marin, we use Alert Marin, we use Nixle. We have options to send out things like the wireless emergency alerts, similar to the presidential alerts that ring every cell phone in a region. We use NOAA weather radios, but you've got to be registered for, and you've got to understand how you might receive alerts when a fire's threatening your community. Alert Marin, I mentioned, this is our primary emergency notification system in Marin County. Virtually every county in Northern California has a similar system. This is how you will receive your emergency notifications when an evacuation for a wildfire is necessary. This is the best tool we've got. It works well. Nixle is a service that's available to any government agency to send out informational notices. We'll oftentimes repeat messages that went out via Alert Marin on Nixle, but we can't target specific street addresses with Nixle. So Nixle, little more broad reach. Because of that, we use it for informational notices that should go out to the entire community rather than targeted messages. Social media, commonly used. It's a great source of information. Your fire department, sheriff's office is probably using social media like Twitter, Facebook, and Nextdoor to get information out. This is going to be lower level information. When we use these notification systems, the terminology that's distributed is really important. An evacuation order. This is the most important message you might receive. This means that you need to evacuate immediately. You're going to take care of your personal safety. An evacuation warning is the next level down. This is a notification that says that you do have some time to prepare. You've certainly got time to prepare yourself, your family, your pets. You also probably have some time to prepare your home. We in Marin County only use the evacuation warning if you have in the belief of the firefighters who are directing the fire, at least 2 hours to evacuate. Oftentimes it's much more. We want you to consider things like battery backups for your garage doors, especially, but also for your communication. For about $99, you can install a garage door battery backup that will open and shut your garage door. On the packaging for the one they have at Home Depot right now, it says it'll open the door about 50 times during a power outage. It also keeps the button lit up on the wall, makes it easier to find if you need to get out of your garage door at night. And really importantly, it lets you close your garage door behind you. This is important. When you leave, we want you to shut that door behind you to keep embers from blowing into your garage. A battery backup for your phone system can keep your phones ringing. These will run your phones for about 12 hours typically. We want you to be able to receive the phone calls from Alert Marin if the power were to go out overnight while you were asleep and you weren't aware. NOAA weather radios. You're going to hear a lot more about these weather alerting radios. It's what people in the Midwest use to be alerted when a tornado is nearby, and we're going to be using these more and more to alert people to wildfires because they're battery operated and they don't depend on the internet or the grid. Here's this checklist. This checklist is available at firesafemarin.org. On our evacuation page. It's downloadable in a PDF format. You really ought to have one. Divided into 3 columns. The first column are things that you always do when there's a wildfire burning nearby or there's an evacuation warning or order. The second column are things that you'll only do if you have time. So really things that you'll do if there's an evacuation warning or if you're simply concerned because it's maybe a red flag warning has been issued or we're deep into fire season. And the third column are things that you'll do when you're actually evacuating, when you're on the road, once you've left. We need to be prepared for emergencies because we live here in a place that's just constantly confronted by emergencies. Wildfire Go kits have some special needs, but I'll real quickly run through what I think are critical in your Wildfire Go kit. Flashlights. Doesn't matter what time you evacuate, you are going to need a flashlight. And every firefighter I know carries multiple flashlights, one in every pocket, with backup spare batteries. So have a headlamp, have multiple handheld flashlights, and have spare batteries in your Go kit. Make sure that you've got an AM/FM radio. Our checklist goes through items like spending cash, maybe a duplicate credit card, important documents, copies of your passports, your insurance information, a small first aid kit, drinking water. In your Wildfire Go kit, you need to have enough drinking water to get you out of town. You need to have some high energy food. You need to have some basic tools. Store this in a backpack. We want you to be able to put this on your back and move on foot, even though we're going to talk a lot about evacuating by car and why that should be your first choice. It still needs to be portable and something that you can take with you if you do need to leave your car in that outlier scenario. Keep these in your car if you're always with your car or near your front door during fire season. Make a kit for every member of your family, especially for your kids. Make a kit that might be a little different than yours for your pets. It looks like this with your Go kit, a spare set for everybody. And every item shown here, long cotton or wool clothing. Long pants, long shirt. Cotton or wool is important. It won't melt from embers. It won't melt from radiant heat. It provides a huge amount of protection to you. Heavy boots, leather boots. That floppy cotton hat they're wearing is important. It's not there for looks, obviously. It's there to prevent embers from landing in your hair. The 2 pieces of life-saving equipment in this picture and that you need to have in your Go kit are the goggles and the leather gloves. Let me tell you why. The number 1 injury for wildland firefighters are eye injuries. Those gloves, equally life-saving. If debris falls into the roadway during a wildfire and blocks your passage, it fell there because it was on fire. You very well may be able to move that debris out of the road as long as you have protection for your hands. We want you to think about your pets. This isn't just because they're adorable and we love our pets. It's because people love their pets so much that they're willing to die for them. Evacuation routes. That you ought to evacuate by car, you do need to know the route you're taking. We get a lot of questions about what route, what's the safest place, what is my route during a wildfire evacuation. We want you to simplify this and think about your route this way. take the fastest route to the valley floor. And the map that you see here is a new series of evacuation maps that are being published in Marin communities as we speak. These are designed to be easily readable under stress by people who are evacuating. The maps are published in a 3-step process with a citywide or a zone map that helps you figure out which local area map or zone map serves your neighborhood. There are links and QR codes that will allow you to download these maps onto your mobile devices or onto your desktop computer. You can print them. Some of the communities will print these and mail them initially to residents in the neighborhoods. The maps are designed to be printed front and back, and they have an evacuation checklist written by FireSafe Marin.
The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority commissioned an evacuation risk assessment in early 2021, addressing prevention measures that can be implemented to reduce risks that may affect a successful evacuation before it takes place. The evacuation study identifies and quantifies risk factors like topography, vegetation, traffic constraints, the presence of vulnerable populations, the locations of safe refuges, and the level of preparedness of communities. With this information, agencies will be able to determine and to prioritize improvements that can be made to reduce risks. Learn more about the evacuation study at www.marinwildfire.org. We'd like to introduce you to a new evacuation tool that will soon be launched in Marin County, Zone Haven. This app is going to give local agencies instant and constant information that is viewable by the public. Residents will know exactly what zone they're in, where they need to go in an evacuation. It will help with traffic management and where to put traffic control. As the county gets ready to launch Zone Haven, a Know Your Zone campaign will start so residents can learn which zone they live in and how to use the system.
One of the things we did earlier today is we created a poll. I think we're going to share the poll results in a minute, but there was one important question on there related to what we just saw, and that was asking what percentage of people were signed, who are viewing tonight, were signed up for Alert Marin. And I have to say, this is a very well-informed, very well-prepared group, because look at that, 83% are signed up for Alert Marin, and that's really just great, fantastic. So just, I think it might be some interest for everybody to see this. So we have about half of us are pretty well informed, which is good. Some are very well informed. Again, it's kind of an educated audience tonight. A lot of you have packed your go pick kit, making an evacuation plan. We're going to get to the evacuation checklist, Zone Haven, the fire clear maps in a second. A lot of you working on your home. Everybody's done some clearing around there. That's great. Firewise, 25%, that's still a good start, and there's going to be more of that out there. So just wanted to share that with everybody. And then let's come back to one of the things that I thought was interesting on there was, once again, the fact that that a lot of people still haven't really thought through evacuation. So Jordan, what do you think about the evacuation checklist that FireSafe Marin has?
I think that the checklist is a great item to kind of prepare yourself, right? And you know, we need to be careful as we enter into the technological, or I shouldn't say enter into it, as technology becomes more prevalent as it relates to fire operations and community evacuation routes, et cetera, is that, you know, fire is a very dynamic environment, right? And it's really hard to come up with a to B plan every time, right? We don't know what it's going to do. Every fire would burn different depending on the day it starts and the time of the day it starts. So it's really important to pre-think the basic stuff, making sure you understand, you know, where your primary evacuation route is, that you have a secondary one, and what you're kind of maybe thinking about where you might have to shelter in place in your community. And the videos that show, the previous video, you know, about knowing your neighbors and who needs help, right? And who might need some assistance getting out. Those are all critical components of it. And I think hopefully with the new technology that's coming out, it's just going to provide another tool. But we don't want people, right, like staring at our phones as we're trying to evacuate. We need to be really cognizant of what's going on around us, right? And that, we don't just want to follow the ways that says, I need, okay, go left here, go right here, right? We need to be really cognizant of, because it's not, the apps aren't picking up on fire behavior, right? They're just predetermined routes. It's not based on fire scenarios that are actually happening. So we just need to make sure we use our observation tools, and we just really pre-think out the basic level stuff of our go bags, our pets, our family, our friends, and then we have meeting places and we have ways to communicate with people once we get out. So I think that's the biggest take home with all of that. And I think as the technologies develop and we become more comfortable with them, people will be able to use them a little more effectively, I think, and have them help, especially if they're in a new area. And that's where it could be potentially, or if you're I know in Inverness, for example, there's quite a number of rental homes, right? VRBOs, et cetera. They can provide that information to someone who's there for a week, right? It is from Taos, New Mexico, or Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine, and to be able to say, oh, here's basic level way I could get out of here. They could provide that to some of the people staying there. So,
yeah. So once fires start somewhere and people are reading about them, the most commonly asked question anywhere I go in Marin is about evacuation, and I usually have kind of a simple answer. The real trick is to be the first one out. So if you have thought all of this through, how you're going to evacuate, and you're ready to go, and you get out of the house in no time at all, you're not even going to be dealing with traffic. You're going to be the first one on the road, and you'll be on your way out there, and that's really the trick. So that's really the best way to prepare to evacuate. It's great. I think that we're getting Zone Haven and the Fire Clear maps and so forth is out there, but really personal preparedness really is very important. Think things through, be ready to go. Know what the alert and warning systems are, be signed up for things. And one other thing that we have not talked very much about, and it probably is an issue in various parts of West Marin, and that is the NOAA weather radios. So I live in an area, Sleepy Hollow, that has no cell phone coverage on a regular day. And so we really can't, if we're relying on your cell phone to receive alert Marin message, you're not going to get it out here. If we compound our problem here with a power safety shutoff, then we're going to really have no way to get it, a message out here. And I know some of that's true for West Marin. There's areas of West Marin with no cell coverage. And besides the power safety shutoffs that are organized, being in more rural areas, there's lots of other reasons why you can lose power for some period of time out there. So one way to make sure that you're going to get an alert is through a NOAA weather radio. We started a pilot program of distributing them around Marin so that people can make sure that they work everywhere, and they really do seem to work everywhere in Marin County. They're not very expensive radios, about $30. You plug them into the wall. They have a battery backup, which is just 3 AAA batteries that are in there. And you can go to bed at any night knowing that even if the power goes off, that if there's an alert Marin message that a wildfire is coming your way, or you need to evacuate or be prepared to evacuate, that you're going to get that message. So I think we'll be hearing more about that. And this may, I don't know what you think, Jordan, but I think it's another sort of valuable thing to provide some reassurance to people living out there.
Most definitely. And just a little bit on where we are, with that pilot program. We've distributed a number to the San Geronimo VERD group, the Valley Emergency Response group, who will be distributing them to certain residents in Marin based on need, to kind of distribute them around the community to see where they work, where they don't work. And then for the folks out in West Marin, Inverness, Stinson, Bolinas, there should have been allocation of some that were already given to the fire chief, the fire departments there for distribution. And we're also working with the Point Reyes Disaster Council. They'll be reaching out to residents to see who might be interested in trying one of these out. So we are actively getting them out there into the community. And the only thing they're asking is that people provide an email so they can just start to create the map of where maybe there are some even holes in the communication for them.
Great. All righty. I think we're really at the point of wrapping up for tonight. Hopefully we have provided people, this is kind of a synthesis of all the webinars we've been doing during the year. And I know it's a lot of information, and 2 hours plus is a long time to do this. So I really applaud all of you who've stuck through it. If you had to leave early or you have friends who missed it, it will be available on our YouTube channel for future viewing. Before I give a thank you, I just want to know, Jordan, if you had any last takeaways that you want to add for anybody.
Not too many. I think just it's really important, as you know, the topic of conversation kind of as this before this program was being developed, you know, it's really on people's mind right now is the drought, right? And the potential for the fire season that's coming. And I think, you know, we're not prognosticators. We can't determine where fires start, how they start, but I think, you know, the fire behavior and the intensities we saw last year, and we had a significant fire in a non-traditional place on the coast last year as well. I think those are good indicators with a very dry winter again, that we just need to be, we should always be on alert, but a hyper alert, and just start really maybe thinking a little earlier than we traditionally would. The grass is already starting to cure out. Fire season is going to be here very quickly, especially in the grass and brush components. So let's just make sure we're thinking about it early, and I'm sure that we will continue to get information from the media and general public. And then the other just reminder to everybody is not to get overwhelmed with all of this information, to really start simply. And Fire Safe Marin has so much information on there that you can dive in at your own pace, at your own leisure, gather more information, rewatch something, watch something new, but to really just start focusing on simple stuff. And that's getting you and your family out, you know, getting out safely, and then starting to prepare your home from the house out, right? And really doing those little things that have been talked about here, and go to Fire Safe Marin to get more information, because there is a lot of it, and you can really become a student. There's way more information out there now than there has ever been. And don't get caught in too much trying to dig too deep, but just stick to the basics at this point.
Great. Thank you very much, Jordan. I do want to thank, again, everybody for staying this long. For those who are still interested, we have a short survey. If you have time, we'd appreciate it if you fill that out for us. Meanwhile, if you have any questions or follow-up, we're there at Fire Safe Marin to answer any of your questions. We're easy to get a hold of. I really want to thank Supervisor Rodoni for joining us tonight, his comments and helping to advertise this. It's just really important, and I think shows the commitment him and the whole board and the whole staff over there at MWPA to make Marin more fire safe. Jordan, thank you so much. It's just wonderful having you. Really appreciate it. It is great to have somebody who's a real local out there. That's fantastic. And then behind the scenes, Jen Ghana, Meg McCabe, Aaron Harris, you know, thank you so much. That's the staff of Fire Safe Marin that helped put all this together. We couldn't do it without all of them chipping in. And so again, a good night to everybody. Let's have a safe fire season. And hopefully we'll see you all at our next webinar towards the end of the month. Should be interesting, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much.